Hello again, this is James with The World's Last Night, coming at you with chapter 19 of Genesis. The word of today is theophany, which, remember, in the last chapter I said that there's a word for when God appears to people in the Old Testament in a pre-incarnate second person of the Trinity, in other words, Jesus. Well, we have a word for that, theophany, also, which, theo means God, and then ophany, appearance. Another word is Christophany, which would be a Christ appearance. So it's pretty well contended that when you see the angel of the Lord appearing in the Old Testament, that refers to a Christophany. So Jesus, prior to the incarnate, coming down and appearing to people. A lot of times people are terribly afraid or awestruck, or in the case of this last chapter, Abraham bowed down to his knees. These appearances have similarities with when angels appear, but ultimately they tend to be above and beyond what an angel, I guess, the power that an angel would have, or the influence an angel would have over mankind in these appearances. So I also mentioned, the fourth person in the furnace. There's some other examples of this, and we find that the appearances of the angel of the Lord stop in the Bible after Jesus is born. So there's a lot of reasons to believe that these appearances are actually God himself come down to speak to these people in the Old Testament. Pretty cool. So theophany or Christophany. Okay, chapter 19, verse 1. Remember in the last chapter, the angels leave to go check out Sodom? Here we go. The two angels entered Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at Sodom's gate. When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them. He bowed with his face to the ground and said, "My lords, turn aside to your servant's house, wash your feet, and spend the night. Then you can get up early and go on your way." "No," they said, "we would rather spend the night in the square." But he urged them so strongly that they followed him and went into his house. He prepared a feast and baked unleavened bread for them, and they ate. Now, why did Lot urge them to stay with him? Could be a couple reasons. As you find out later on, the people in this town have a proclivity for, I guess, sexually assaulting strangers. Not very cool, but we already knew that people in this town are kind of evil from past scripture. And so Lot turns them away from basically staying in the public square and says, "No, come to my house." It could be another reason. He could recognize who they are and their magnificence and want them to just grace his home. So, verse 4, before they went to bed, the men of the city of Sodom, both young and old, the whole population, surrounded the house. That's probably a exaggeration, the whole population, but a great deal of people showed up. Hyperbole is the word I'm looking for. Verse 5, they called out to Lot and said, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Send them out to us so we can have sex with them." Pretty messed up. Verse 6, Lot went out to them at the entrance and shut the door behind him. He said, "Don't do this evil, my brothers. Look, I've got two daughters who haven't had sexual relations with a man. I'll bring them out to you, and you can do whatever you want to them. However, don't do anything to these men, because they have come under the protection of my roof." That's pretty messed up. There's no excuse for a lot of the behavior going on here. Why would he, sacrifice his daughters to this horde of people that obviously want to have sex with men? I don't know. It's evil. I mean, he's basically calling out these people, saying, "Don't do this evil to these men who are under my protection, / go ahead and do this evil to my daughters who are under my protection." A little bit of doublethink there. Very messed up. So it looks like Lot has been somewhat influenced by his culture, as opposed to him influencing the culture. He's been influenced. Now, there's a proverb that says, "Bad company corrupts good character." In other words, if you hang out long enough in the company of people with bad character, you will eventually sink down to that level. And so as Christians, you constantly need to surround yourself with people of good character so that you can be fed and built up. But likewise, never neglect to evangelize the lost, the broken, the sinful, those people still need your friendship and your love, and they need to hear the gospel from you, but they probably shouldn't be your primary source of friendship, or else most likely they're dragging you down and not vice versa. That's just a little bit of wisdom, and I would say Lot has been influenced by his culture in this regard, but he does remember some of the righteous ways of his uncle Abraham, who has his own issues, right? And I think he's having this war in his spirit, and he really doesn't know what to do. But he's facing off this mob and offering an evil to try to prevent an evil. Okay, verse 9. Get out of the way, they said, adding, this one came here as a foreigner, but he's acting like a judge. Now we'll do more harm to you than to them. Well, dang. It sucks. So Lot came to Sodom, if you remember. He broke off from Abraham, and apparently people don't like him. They don't like how judgy he is. Super judgy. They're like, well, now we're gonna do terrible things to you. They put pressure on Lot and came up to break down the door, but the angels reached out, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. Go, angels. It's your birthday. All right, verse 11. They struck the men who were at the door of the house, both young and old, with a blinding light, so they were unable to find the door. It's a good defense mechanism angels have, apparently. Blind the mob of people, so they have a hard time finding door handle. And I guess doing much of anything at that point, if they were used to seeing all their life. It'd be very difficult for them to now assault people. Verse 12. Then the angels said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, a son-in-law, your sons and daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of this place. So the angel has come to rescue Lot and his family. All right, get them out of this place. For we're about to destroy this place because the outcry against his people is great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Because the outcry against his people is great before the Lord. So like I said in the last chapter, apparently it's not just the residents of this place, but also the surrounding peoples feel like Sodom has unjustly treated them, and the outcry is great, and God is fed up, and he's going to destroy this place. He sent these angels to do that work. You find that actually frequently in the Bible. You find in Egypt, in Exodus, angel comes to take the firstborn, right? So God sends angels. They're ministering spirits. They always do good. It's just, you don't want to be on the bad side of the good that's being done. You want to be on the good side of it. Now, additionally, in Revelation, you find that angels have a lot of power that God gives them to affect the planet. So these are ministering spirits. They've come in human-like form to rescue Lot and this group of people before they bring judgment upon the city. So verse 14. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were going to marry his daughter. Get up, he said. Get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. I wonder if they also thought he was joking about, sending out these other daughters, the sisters of their brides, to this horde of people. It's strange. And like I said, you can't make this stuff up. Like, it actually, for me, it leans credence that these are things that actually occurred. Because, as one of my pastors used to say, if the Bible was just written by man, we would probably look better in it. I mean, we'd be the center focus. We'd probably look really good. But no, most of the people in the Bible look really bad, except for Jesus Christ. At some point in their life, they have moments, right? So, we're having moments. 15. At the crack of dawn, the angels urged Lot on. Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are there, or you will be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he hesitated. So because of the Lord's compassion for him, the men grabbed his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, and they brought him out and left him outside the city. As soon as the angels got them outside, one of them said, Run for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere on the plain. Run to the mountains, or you will be swept away. But Lot said to them, No, Lord, please. Your servant has indeed found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness by saving my life. But I can't run to the mountains. The disaster will overtake me, and I will die. Look, this town is close enough for me to run to. It is a small place. Please let me go there. It's only a small place, isn't it? So that I can survive. And he said to him, all right, I'll grant your request about this matter too, and will not overthrow the town you mentioned. Hurry up, run there, for I cannot do anything until you get there. Therefore, the name of the city is Zor. So, I don't know what Zor means. Let's see here. It's related to the word for small place. Its original name was Bela. All right, so Zor, it means small place. The angel of the Lord has to drag them, or not angel of the Lord, these angels have to drag Lot and his family out to the edge of the city, and then they tell them to run into the mountains, go live there. Lot's like, I can't do that. That's too hard. Can I go to this tiny city called Zor? And he says, okay, sure. Well, we're not going to do anything until you get there. And so they're being saved, but they wouldn't go on their own, which is sort of interesting. They had to kind of be drug out. So God really wants to save this family. The sun had risen over the land when Lot reached Zor. Then the Lord rained burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the sky. He overthrew these cities, the entire plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and whatever grew on the ground. But his wife looked back and became a pillar of salt. Man, that's pretty harsh. Okay, so apparently these cities, it's sort of believed, used to have existed where the Dead Sea is currently today. They were destroyed with sulfur raining from the sky and burning sulfur. Could have been a volcano. Could have been sort of similar to, Pompeii. Something like that. Could have been a meteorite, shower. In any case, through supernatural means, or natural means, I guess, but through the will of God, this city was destroyed. Early in the morning, Abraham went to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and all the land of the plain, and he saw the smoke was going up from the land like the smoke of a furnace. So it was when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham and brought Lot out of the middle of the upheaval when he overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. So for Abraham's sake, it looks like God preserved Lot and, tried to preserve his wife. His wife disobeyed. So if you remember, the angel said, do not look back. And, the wife disobeyed. She looked back, turned into a pillar of salt. Not sure exactly what that is, but she died. And for disobeying. So the two daughters are saved and Lot is saved. And the only reason is because the Lord remembered Abraham. So that's where we're at now. We're going to get into some more weird stuff. And then I'm going to talk about, I guess, just sexual immorality in general at the end of this chapter, because there's a lot of it in here. It's nuts. So here we go. Verse 30. Lot departed from Zor and lived in the mountains along with his two daughters, because he was afraid to live in Zor. I guess he was a wanted man or something, or people thought he was cursed. Instead, he and his two daughters lived in a cave. Then the first... You know what? He went from this super wealthy guy under the wing of Abraham to living in a cave. Something messed up in his life. Then the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is no man in the land to sleep with us, as is the custom of all the land. That's probably not true. Go back to Zor. There's probably some in there. Anyways, come, let's get our father to drink wine so that we can sleep with him and preserve our father's line. Do you remember me discussing Kantianism and utilitarianism? This is a utilitarian idea. Let's basically date rape our dad so we can bring about this greater good of preserving his line of, heritage. It's bad. You're using someone to try to bring about a good, so you're committing an evil to try to bring about some good. And because having heirs is good, and in this society there was only male heirs, so you needed a son. But the way they're going about it is pretty jacked up. So they got their father to drink wine that night, and the firstborn came and slept with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she got up. So apparently I would say he just forgot. He was so drunk. 34. The next day the firstborn said to the younger, look, I slept with my father last night. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight so you can go sleep with him and we can preserve our father's line. That night they again got their father to drink wine, and the younger went and slept with him. He did not know when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The firstborn gave birth to a son and named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger also gave birth to a son, and she named him Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites of today. That's the end of verse 19. This whole chapter really deals with how sexual immorality infected the city, all of its inhabitants, including these daughters, well, including Lot, who tried to send these daughters out, right? And then additionally, the daughters themselves that obviously grew up in this culture, this society where anything went in regards to sex, including, what's it called? Incestuous relationships. There we go. So let's just talk a little bit about what God's plan for sex was. If you remember, he created Adam and Eve in the garden, right? He married them. He told them to be fruitful and multiply, which in there is have sex and create children. Now, is the purpose of sex? It's really threefold. One, procreation. That's the obvious design of it, to make children. Two, pleasure. That's the obvious side effect of it. Three, protection. And now Paul in the New Testament talks about this one considerably. I think I remember talking a little bit about how he is writing to a church and saying, I wish you could be like me, where you could be single and celibate. Now, we don't know if Paul was always single. He may have been married back in his Pharisee days. But at this point when he's writing, he is. But then he goes on to say, but, because of the temptation to sexual immorality, it's good for each of you to have a spouse. So sex in that regard is for protection against sexual immorality, which is temptation to sleep with people that aren't your spouse and to be, led astray by your desires to sin against God. So that's why the New Testament really, it has these basic stipulations. One, sex is to be done inside marriage. Before marriage is called fornication. That's a no-no. There's no the covenant involved in that to then be able to raise children in a stable, marriage. So that's one reason why that's a no-no. Two, it is supposed to be done frequently within marriage. Paul even says something to the effect of, don't deny one another your, conjugal rights, your marriage rights, except perhaps for a time, so you can devote to prayer, but quickly come back together so that you aren't tempted. That's the gist of what Paul tells married Christians. So you're supposed to have sex frequently in marriage so that both partners are satisfied and there's protection against that temptation. Okay, so the perversions of this in this chapter are clear. You have rape, for example. That is the men of the town, young and old, come and demand from Lot that they throw the angels who took on the form of men out so they could have sex with them. Now, a mob does that. That's going to be forced. It's definitely not consensual. So rape is a perversion of sex because you are supposed to do it consensually, which means voluntarily, not against your will. And the reason, or sort of a passage to back that up, would be in the New Testament, where Paul argues that your body's not your own. And he says that to both the husband and the wife. Husband, your body's not your own, but it is also the wife's. And wife, your body's not your own, it's also the husband's. So the idea is that you are trying to seek each other's pleasure and benefit, but it's voluntary, and it's supposed to be mutual because you're one flesh now. So in any case, this passage shows us rape, or attempted rape. Oh my gosh, it shows us Lot trying to use his daughters to bribe a mob off, use them. I mean, he specifically cites that they're virgins. And you have to be careful with the word virgin in the Bible. I don't think it said that, but virgin in the Bible it usually means a young woman. It doesn't necessarily mean one that hasn't had sex, but this one specifically says that. So you kind of have sex slavery shown there. 3, you have homosexuality. You have these men wanting to have sex with other men. That's where we get the word sodomy from, by the way, is from this passage about Sodom, because this presumably was a practice that was widespread in this city, which would be same-sex sex, and the Bible roundly condemns that from Old Testament to New Testament. If you want a New Testament reference, check out Romans 1, and God basically says, or the writer basically says that God will turn people over to the desires of their flesh to basically, if they give into idolatry, he's going to let them. And they're going to continue to, the culture is going to continue to devolve. And one hallmark of this is homosexuality. And so that is a perversion of what God intended sex to be, because he created Adam and Eve, a male and a female. They work perfectly together. Now, in our culture, homosexuality is very widely accepted now. It wasn't so several years ago, several decades ago, but it is now. And there's there's a lot of interesting things to talk about when it comes to that subject. First, as a Christian, your job, first and foremost, is to share the gospel and the love of Christ. It's not to condemn people. It's not to say, as the Westboro Baptist Church would say, that, God hates you because you're homosexual. That's not true. God loves you. In the midst of your sin, he loves you, no matter what your sin is. He desires you to repent, and he's going to help you do that. So as a Christian, your job's not to condemn people for their sexual perversions. Your job is to share the gospel. And the church needs to do a good job of this, especially in our current climate. And we wish that they did a better job of this previously. Probably wouldn't have so many issues that we do today in this regard. But unfortunately, our culture is normalizing the practice currently, especially through entertainment, through politics, many different areas. But it's our job as the church to stand up for truth and say, nope, this isn't God's design for sex. But this is, show what the design really is and share the gospel. It's not to condemn them. Remember, we're all already condemned because of our sin. No one has to harp on that. Satan does a really good job of that. But Jesus didn't come to condemn the world. He came to save the world. So you have to stand for truth. You have to be truthful if someone asks you. But you also have to be loving and kind and gracious. And you need to understand that the Greek word porneia, which is where we get sexual immorality from in the New Testament, covers a gamut of things. I mean, it includes homosexuality, but it also includes every other deviant sexual practice there is. And to God, they're all sin. None of them are necessarily worse than others. They might have worse effects than others, but to God, they're all sin. Now, in the New Testament, we see that Paul writes something to the effect of, the people that engage in the practice receive in themselves the due penalty, or in their bodies, the due penalty for the sin. You can't say for certain, and when we get to that chapter, we'll talk about it more. You can't say for certain what that is, but we do know in the modern era that, according to the CDC, the majority of contractions for HIV is among the homosexual population, and it's the vast majority. The vast majority of new cases every year is within the 1.5% of the population that identifies as male homosexuals who have sex with men. And so it's apparently a practice that can wreak havoc on your own body in contracting disease. So there's that. So there's a lot of aspects to this. It's God's trying to, when he set up creation a certain way, it's the best way. And when we deviate from that path, there are obviously consequences of we're sinning and we're going to be separate from our God. There's also very, very real physical consequences too. Emotional, mental. And so sin touches everything. And it impacts people for generations. And apparently this culture also impacted Lot and his daughters, because we have to talk about like a fourth sexual immorality, which would be incest. Now, at this point in time, some biblical, I say a lot of biblical scholars try to argue that incest isn't wrong at this point in time, that it hasn't been barred. We don't have the Levitical law yet. I would say that it probably is, even at this point, wrong. At the very least, you can say the daughters drugging their dad and doing it against his will or knowledge was wrong. But I think also incest was not part of God's original plan either. But a lot of biblical scholars use it as a way of showing how the population even grew, right? From Adam and Eve, from Noah and his children. And I lean more towards this idea that God may have created other people than just Adam and Eve at that time. Don't know. Either way. Honestly, don't care. That was then, this is now. And incest isn't something that people should engage in. So this chapter's rife with just tons of sexual immorality. In earlier, or when Noah's flood happens, all of men's desires and thoughts were basically violence. That seemed to be a really big sin then. In this one, we're looking at lots and lots of sexual immorality before God destroys these cities, brings wrath upon them. No matter what the sin is, it really comes down to pride. Most sin is derived from pride. It's this idea that I know better than God, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm the ruler. I want to be the king. I don't want to place him as my Lord and have lordship towards him. And if you do that, God's going to let you, but there's penalties. And in the end, it just leads to destruction. And it's not what's best for you. So that's all I got to say on this chapter. Reading the Old Testament can be, once again, sort of demoralizing to watch these people who don't have the example of Jesus like we do sort of grope around to try to find a righteous path. And there's just so much sin and destruction and despair. And it really just makes me thankful that Jesus came to show us how we should live and to correct some of our bad thinking, to give us some good philosophy. Philosophy just meaning right thinking. So until next time, this is James with The World's Last Night.